Let's talk about spousal coverage. We often sell the breadwinner. We often also sell the spouse. In fact, that's one of the things that you're measured on, is how often you sell them both. You're talking to one, you should be selling them both. And you say, well, you know, some people don't think they need coverage on the spouse. Some customers don't think they need coverage on their spouse. And I'm going to use, not to be gender biased, I'm just going to use the male and female in the traditional sense. It could go the other way as well. But let's say the guy works and he makes $100,000 and the wife is a stay-at-home mom. Just what she's chosen to do because they can afford it. He makes $100,000, she can afford to stay home. And so he says, well, I don't really need coverage on her because she doesn't make any money. And, you know, a lot of people feel that way. One of my customers, oddly enough, after being in the business 8 years, I still didn't understand this. I had to have a customer teach this to me. He calls up. This was early on in the early days of AccuQuote. I had an ad on the radio. Guy calls me, and he says he needs $8 million of coverage. I'm like, whoa, you know, this is great. An $8 million order on the phone. I mean, it's awesome, right? And he says, then I want $2 million on my wife. I'm like, okay, sure. Take the app, sends it to the carrier. A couple weeks later, the carrier calls me back and said, well, you know, we got the $8 million on him. He makes a couple $1 million a year. It's easy, no problem. But we don't want to issue $2 million on the wife. We don't understand why he wants that much on her. She doesn't have any assets of her own. She doesn't have any income. She's a stay-at-home mom. Why does he want $2 million on the wife? And I was like, I don't know. I'll ask him. So I go back to him and Lance, you know, the carrier's balking at, you know, they're cool with you, but they're balking on putting $2 million on your wife. Can you give me a little bit of background as to why you want $2 million on her? And he says, well, here's how I look at it, Byron. He says, I'm a trader. I go down, I leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm downtown getting myself ready to go long before my kids even wake up. And I get home long after they get home from school, and I know that my wife's taking care of business at home. And we have a nanny too, by the way, which I pay for, okay? But I can tell you that if something happened to me, there is no way I'm going back to work Monday. I'm sorry, if something happened to my wife, there's no way I'm going back to work Monday. It's not going to happen. My kids, they're all under 8 years old. They're not going to understand why their mom's gone. There's 4 kids. I can't just let some nanny raise my kids. I'm going to probably take 3-4 years off to be with my kids, to help them get through this. And I'm going to have a loss of income. And I'm like, duh. The next day, I bought $2 million on my wife. That's when I bought it on her. I mean, I got it. And so, yeah, most people don't have a nanny that's $30,000 a year. But if you lose your spouse, not only do you have to have that nanny, but you're probably going to have a loss of income. I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie Kramer versus Kramer. It's a great film with Dustin Hoffman, Meryl Streep, and it's just about divorce and and Dustin Hoffman was this big advertising executive, and he ends up losing his job because he's so distracted with all this divorce crap. Could you imagine losing your spouse? I mean, you might lose your job too. I mean, it's a difficult thing to get through. And so people don't understand that even a non-income earning spouse can cause a huge financial impact if she leaves. So we recommend $250 to $500. We can pretty much get the same face amount on a spouse that we get on the breadwinner, but $250 to $500 as a minimum number. And that's a number that you're going to be measured on. If you're not selling spouses, you're not talking about it. Because if you talk about it the way I just did, people do get it. They really do. It's really important.